She was a well-paid senior teacher who insisted on working at this ordinary elementary school. Yet on the very first day of school, she tossed the test papers onto the floor and deliberately made the failing students crouch down to pick them up. But to the high-achieving students, she would gently hand them the papers. Even worse, the top 3 students not only had no homework but could also choose any seat they liked. The worst-performing student, however, was assigned the grueling role of class monitor. Every menial, dirty chore fell to them, even cleaning the toilets. This tyrannical management style quickly stirred up the students' emotions, but instead of addressing their concerns, the teacher delivered a starkly realistic truth. Smart and hard-working people get ahead. That's just how it is. The students exchanged stunned glances. Meanwhile, Saki was so nervous she couldn't speak. She hadn't prepared for today's surprise exam. Worse, Saki broke her only pencil right at the start. She wanted to tell the teacher, but facing Junko's stern gaze, timid Saki couldn't bring herself to speak. Seeing her distress, the boy next to her kindly slipped her a pencil. But Junko wouldn't tolerate such behavior. She stepped forward decisively to stop him. Left with no pencil, Saki had no choice. In the end, she could only hand in a blank exam paper. Joining her with a 0 was Toshiro, who consistently ranked at the bottom of the class. Thus, the two were assigned to clean all the school's restrooms after class, as per the rules. Fortunately, Toshiro was very considerate. He took on all the work himself, sparing Saki the distress of cleaning the toilets. Little did Saki know her troubles were just beginning. The next day, the pair were assigned to distribute lunch for the entire class. Unexpectedly, Saki accidentally knocked over the food container. Thick curry instantly spilled onto the floor. Just as Toshiro instinctively moved to find someone from the cafeteria, Junko immediately called out to stop him. Seeing the dwindling amount of curry left in the container, she ordered Toshiro to distribute it only to the top 3 students. The rest would eat plain rice, a chance to learn to value food. If you're angry, blame those 2 clumsy classmates. Since the top 3 got curry, the rest had only plain rice. They shot Junko resentful glances, but soon, the students couldn't take it anymore. During lunch break, they quietly sought out the gentle Ms. Tomomi from the neighboring class. Though these girls weren't her students, after hearing their story, Tomomi resolved to speak with Junko. Returning to the office with the students' hopes, Tomomi confronted Junko immediately, stating her management was excessive and cruel to treat elementary students this way. The vast disparity from the exam would only make students resentful of class. Junko retorted that Tomomi should mind her own students instead of meddling in others' affairs. According to my investigation, Tomomi continued, your class has not only had theft incidents but also several recent bullying cases. At that moment, the grade coordinator recalled catching several children running in the hallway during his previous class. This conversation was overheard by Saki, who had crouched down nearby. Seeing the teachers finish their discussion, Saki hurriedly stood up to leave. However, on her way back to class, she encountered Junko again. When Junko looked her way, Saki panicked and fled, but Junko called out her name, stating someone had complained to other teachers. She hoped such incidents wouldn't happen again. If you have any grievances, speak directly to me. Even after Junko passed by, Saki stood frozen in place. Clearly, she hadn't recovered from her fright. Later, on her way home from school, Saki was deeply troubled. She asked her older sister how she could change things if teachers were singling her out at school because of her poor grades. Her sister's answer was simple: if you improve your grades, this kind of thing won't happen. Hearing her sister's words, Saki finally found her direction. She began studying diligently, reviewing her notes on the way to school. In class, she listened intently, committing every detail to memory. Even after school, Saki stayed behind to study until she mastered everything before heading home. Soon, the second exam arrived. To ensure nothing went wrong, Saki prepared 5 pencils beforehand to prevent the previous embarrassment from repeating. But perhaps due to nerves, Saki forgot to go to the bathroom after class. Only when the exam officially began did Saki realize it was too late. She could only grit her teeth and bury her head in the test. But as time slowly passed, young Saki felt she simply couldn't hold on. Unable to bear it anymore, she asked Junko if she could go to the restroom. If you really need to go, you won't be able to return to finish the exam, Junko replied. Saki could only clam up and anxiously wait for the bell. But just then, Chie, the top student in the class, suddenly stood up. She decisively spoke up to plead for Saki, adding that teacher Junko shouldn't be so strict with the students. Chia pointed out that Saki had been studying incredibly hard lately. We've all seen it, so please grant her request. After all, Saki just needs to use the restroom. I'm sure any other teacher would agree. Upon hearing this, Junko walked straight to Chia. Junko stated that to prevent Saki from cheating outside, Chia must accompany her. However, as punishment for disrupting classroom rules, Chia's exam would be scored as 0. Chia then took Saki's hand and walked out together under the classmates' gaze. Only after they left the classroom did Junko open Chia's exam paper, only to find all the correct answers already filled in. Meanwhile, Saki, who had just reached the hallway, suddenly crouched down. Chia turned around just in time to see Saki finally unable to hold it in. She sat there on the floor, looking dejected, a wet spot forming before her. Chia didn't say much. She simply told Saki to go to the infirmary to change her clothes first. She stayed behind to clean up the mess. But just as Saki was about to leave, Chia called out to her from behind. After the exam ended, Junko looked at Chia sternly. Because you care too much about your classmates, Chia and Toshiro will be next week's class leaders. Junko also added a new class rule. From now on, any student who defies the teacher will be punished by serving as class leader. What no one knew yet was that Junko's true goal was to make the students lose their unity. That morning, Saki lingered 2 extra minutes over breakfast before a sudden realization struck her. She immediately sprinted towards school, terrified of the new teacher's strictness. Saki feared severe punishment for being late, but when she finally reached the school, it was already too late. The teacher had reached the classroom door, leaving Saki no chance to slip in unnoticed. Fortunately, a boy deliberately drew the teacher's attention, allowing Saki to escape punishment. The boy wasn't so lucky, though. The teacher publicly made him apologize to the entire class, and punished him by making him clean the entire building. Not only that, but teacher Junko seemed to have guessed something. She walked straight to the back of the students, and first confiscated a novel, then pulled out manga and stuffed toys. Junko also told all the students that from now on, if anyone brought anything unrelated to studying, she would confiscate it without exception. These strict rules immediately sparked discontent among the students. After class, they gathered to complain, deciding unanimously to report Junko's actions to their parents, including assigning bathroom cleaning duties and making them go hungry during lunch breaks. But Saki disagreed. Though she disliked Junko too, Saki had a strange feeling. If Junko dared punish students, she mustn't fear parental complaints. Yet Saki couldn't dissuade her classmates. That evening, upon arriving home, she overheard her mother on the phone with the PTA. It seemed the matter had already reached her ears. Her mother demanded, "What kind of teacher is this?" The next day, a large group of parents descended on the school. Their purpose was clear. Though Junko wasn't in her office, the parents surrounded the principal, demanding the school provide an explanation that very day. Why had they hired such a terrible teacher? Despite the principal explaining Junko had been a highly renowned senior teacher, the parents refused to believe it. Their children described Junko as nothing but a tyrannical, terrible teacher. Just as the principal was at a loss, Junko finally arrived. Late, she walked expressionlessly to her desk, her powerful presence instantly silencing everyone. The leading parent, however, confronted her for her children's sake. As their teacher, you not only denied them lunch but deliberately punished them by making them clean the restrooms. Junko said little in response. She first organized materials for the next class, before solemnly announcing to everyone, "I will speak with each parent individually." Surprisingly, every parent who spoke with Junko emerged with a satisfied smile. Waiting parents later learned Junko had assured them that if they cooperated with her, she could definitely get their children into prestigious middle schools. Yet Saki's mother remained unconvinced. After all, her child's healthy development mattered far more to her. When it finally came time for Saki's mother to speak, Junko stated, "Do you know Saki scored 0 on both exams?" Junko then explained that assigning Saki menial tasks lately was meant to foster reflection and growth. Only by experiencing the difference between mental and physical labor could Saki grasp the importance of studying. Before Saki's mother could respond, Junko continued, "As a woman myself, I deeply understand your struggles. 15 years of tireless dedication to your family. You're a truly remarkable mother. But if Saki puts in the effort, she will absolutely get into a private middle school." As Saki's mother bowed in gratitude, Junko had finally persuaded all the parents. Afterward, they left the school in high spirits. continuously praising Junko as an excellent teacher. This entire scene was witnessed by all the students, but Saki suddenly noticed Junko had approached unnoticed. What surprised everyone even more was Junko's jaw-dropping action during the subsequent school bomb drill. As the principal declared the drill official, the grade director, playing the role of the intruder, burst in, following protocol. The female teacher quickly grabbed a weapon to resist, but within mere seconds, she accidentally tripped and fell to the ground. The intruder immediately closed in on the children. Chaos erupted instantly. Seeing this, Junko snatched the microphone and announced her students would return to their classrooms for self-study, refusing to participate in this meaningless drill. The principal was baffled. The teacher just made a mistake. Junko, this is unnecessary, right? If you have doubts, Junko can demonstrate for everyone. To everyone's surprise, Junko agreed immediately. Under all eyes, Junko calmly stepped forward and demanded the fake intruder use full force. An unexpected turn of events unfolded. Junko clearly possessed specialized training, whether parrying blows or dodging attacks. She handled everything with ease. She even seized an opportunity to sidestep and pin the fake assailant. Then, with a swift kick, she sent him crashing to the ground. The principal and teachers were instantly stunned into silence. They could only watch as Junko led her students away. Back in the classroom, Junko reminded her students to know their limits. Junko declared, "I know everything about you, what you think, what you do behind your parents' backs. I know all your secrets, and today, I'll prove it to you." She then pulled out a voice recorder and played a recording of another student deceiving their parents. But Saki spoke up in defiance. Junko responded, "In that case, Saki will handle all the class chores this year." For Junko, however, her plan had only just begun. After school, a sudden downpour began. A lone girl was quickly intercepted by Junko. "If Saki is willing to apologize to me," Junko said, "then the chores should fall to you, the student with the worst grades." That day, Junko noticed something off about one student in the class. Despite 2 months of practice, she couldn't master even the simplest group gymnastics moves. Junko casually scolded her for being hopeless, calling her the dumbest student she'd ever taught. Saki, watching nearby, quietly murmured, "Teacher, that's too harsh." Junko heard her and walked straight up to Saki. "I hear you have years of ballet training. Let me see how well you dance." Saki had no choice but to obey and immediately performed the group routine. She was confident she could execute the movements perfectly. Junko not only sent her home to practice but also criticized her movements as lacking any sense of rhythm. To prove her point, Junko then decided to demonstrate publicly. She began with a light, graceful spin, then shifted into nimble footwork. Next, she swayed her slender arms, even executing challenging ballet steps. Just these few movements made Saki acutely aware of the gap between herself and Junko. Later, influenced by Junko, Saki couldn't resist trying to imitate her during break, but she had overestimated her dance foundation. What Saki didn't know was that her embarrassment was far from over. As dismissal approached that day, Junko gathered everyone for practice again. With the school festival performance just 4 days away, time was running out for the students. Yet haste only bred chaos. Aimi, who had been criticized by Junko before, began making frequent mistakes again. Junko couldn't bear to watch any longer. She walked straight up to Aimi and said without mercy, "How many times do you need to practice before you get it right? If it weren't for your constant mistakes, everyone could have gone home long ago." Faced with Saki's pleas, Junko not only refused to forgive Aimi, but also accused Saki of meddling again. To punish the disobedient students, Junko sent everyone home, keeping only Saki and Aimi behind to clean. Unexpectedly, Chia, the top student in the class, stared at Junko thoughtfully. No one knew what she was thinking. With no other choice, the two began cleaning earnestly. But Aimi, too weak to keep going, soon collapsed from exhaustion. Saki, out of kindness, encouraged her. Soon they finished cleaning the entire floor's hallway. Not only that, Saki realized Aimi was introverted and had no friends. To help her gain confidence, Saki decided to privately teach Aimi gymnastics routines. After school, they went to a quiet park. Saki taught with such dedication that Aimi began to feel a budding friendship. In the days that followed, Saki even took the initiative to invite Aimi to walk to school together. They even practiced the dance moves while walking, determined to impress Junko at the next rehearsal. Aimi, who loved manga, drew a special illustration for Saki. Unexpectedly, after only 2 days of friendship, they had already developed a deep bond. Through Saki's dedicated guidance, Aimee grew increasingly skilled in the group dance. Finally, 3 days later, the final rehearsal arrived. Under Junko's watchful eye, the entire class performed with perfect synchronization. They followed the music's rhythm flawlessly until the very end. Not a single mistake. Yet Junko fixed a stern gaze on Aimee. Though you've improved significantly from before, your steps are still too heavy, it won't do. Junko then informed Aimee, you won't be performing tomorrow, perhaps without Aimee. The group gymnastics routine could finally win first place, though Aimee felt deeply unjustified. She couldn't protest. In truth, Junko had deliberately orchestrated this outcome. Back in the classroom, the classmates immediately felt sympathy for Aimee. They could see she must have practiced tirelessly in secret to make such remarkable progress. To stand up for Aimee, Saki proposed they unite. Tomorrow, everyone would boycott the performance, using this chance to resist Junko's oppression. The classmates agreed instantly. They'd long endured Junko's tyrannical management. Now that the chance had finally come, they weren't about to let it slip away. Chie, however, wasn't optimistic about this so-called rebellion. She firmly believed the students' unity was fragile and easily shattered. If someone tipped off Junko beforehand, the students would be powerless to defend themselves. But the ever-optimistic Saki didn't care. She was convinced the students would stick together. After all, they'd been through 6 years together. And so, the next day, the school festival commenced as scheduled. Parents were invited to attend. Half an hour before the performance, Junko calmly entered the classroom and announced that all students should assemble at the venue. Unexpectedly, the entire class began walking out. They had agreed to resist Junko yesterday. Why were they breaking their promise today? Saki couldn't comprehend how their stance could shift so completely overnight. Only when Aimee picked up her gym uniform did Saki belatedly grasp the truth. Yet she refused to believe her best friend would betray her. Saki felt utterly heartbroken. She flipped through Aimee's comic book. It was filled with drawings of herself. This proved Aimee truly cared. But today's reversal left her utterly baffled. Suddenly, footsteps echoed down the hallway. It was Chie. Defying Junko, she resolutely returned to the classroom. First, Chie handed Saki a handkerchief. Then she said, just as I suspected, Junko called every student's parent last night. That's why everyone's too scared to resist now. And how did Junko find out? I think Saki already figured it out. Aimee ratted us out. After the school festival, the three of them were naturally assigned cleanup duty as punishment. But just as they were relaxing, they suddenly heard Junko's voice. Junko announced that to prevent similar incidents, she would assign a student as an informant. This student would report every detail of the class to her at any time. That day, a wallet went missing in class. Instead of rushing to find the thief, the teacher handed each student a piece of paper. She instructed everyone to write down the names of suspects, and the one with the most votes would be declared the thief. But the students strongly opposed this method. If someone could be convicted just by having their name written down, that would be too unfair. So, to protest the teacher's unreasonable demand, the students all handed in blank slips of paper. Seeing the class so united, the teacher made an unexpected decision. Since no one was willing to suspect their classmates, the entire class would share the responsibility. Every student had to write a self-criticism essay. The student whose wallet was stolen stood up immediately. I'm the victim here. Why should I write a self-criticism? Unexpectedly, the class that had seemed united moments before began to descend into chaos under the teacher's collective punishment. Some students, trying to protect themselves, randomly accused those around them. Others seized the chance to settle personal grudges, deliberately pinning the theft on those they had conflicts with. Still others resorted to the absurdity of judging by appearance alone. The classroom filled with shouts and complaints. Soon Saki couldn't bear it anymore. She stood up and loudly silenced everyone. We shouldn't suspect classmates without evidence. Saki's well-intentioned intervention failed, and she found herself caught up in the chaos. But Junko just watched quietly, not stepping in to stop them. However, a turning point emerged in this farce. During lunch break, Saki went downstairs to throw out the trash as usual. She was startled to notice Akari from her class acting suspiciously. Saki quietly followed to investigate. To her shock, Akari had stolen a classmate's wallet and was about to discard it to destroy the evidence. Realizing she'd been spotted, Akari hastily explained she hadn't intended to steal the money. She claimed the classmate had bought a new wallet and flaunted it everywhere, and she'd taken it out of jealousy. With the situation escalating, Akari realized an apology wouldn't suffice. Facing the kind-hearted Saki, she quickly devised a plan. Since the next class was music, she asked Saki to return the wallet. "You're always the last to leave class, so no one would suspect you." In the end, Saki's soft heart won out, and she agreed. Everyone headed to the music room, while Saki lingered behind. Once the classroom was empty after everyone left, Saki nervously took out the wallet and quietly slipped it back into its owner's backpack. But just then, a girl who'd forgotten something walked into the classroom. Saki rushed after her to explain, but Aimi was running too fast. Soon, she was right in front of Junko. Saki panicked. There was no way she could explain this now. Thus, Junko not only interrupted the music class but also gathered the students in the classroom. Surrounded by her classmates, Saki hung her head, awaiting Junko's judgment. Junko immediately questioned her sternly, stating that if Saki could name the so-called friend, she would be spared punishment. Otherwise, it would prove she was lying and Saki would be the real thief. Yet, even at this critical moment, Saki still couldn't bring herself to name Akari. She couldn't betray the friend she'd grown up with. Junko then decided on the spot that Saki would bear the blame for causing trouble for the class. Saki had to apologize to all her classmates. Then, as punishment, she had to write a self-criticism essay. Though Saki felt deeply wronged, for her best friend's sake, she had no choice but to obey. Afterwards, the classmates began to isolate Saki, refusing even to look her in the eye when passing by. Saki felt deeply troubled and began to waver. Was helping her friend like this truly right? So right after school, she sought out Akari. "Can you please turn yourself in?" Saki pleaded. "I can't bear the cold stares of my classmates any longer." But, unexpectedly, Akari showed a completely different face. She blamed everything on Saki. "If you hadn't stopped me from throwing away the wallet back then, none of this would have happened." Just then, two girls passed by. Spotting them, Akari immediately hurled more cruel words. Saki couldn't believe it. They'd been best friends since childhood. How could this happen? But what Saki didn't know was that Junko already knew the truth. She seemed to be playing a much bigger game. Saki paced outside her home until nightfall. She couldn't accept what had happened today. Saki tossed her umbrella aside and ran, letting the icy rain drench her. Unexpectedly, Junko blocked her path. Junko brought Saki back to her senses. "You've already lost your classmates' trust, but if Saki apologizes to me and promises to be a good girl from now on, obeying everything I say." That day, Saki was just about to open her textbook when she suddenly discovered every page was scribbled on. She knew it was a prank by her classmates but dared not resist. Just then, the teacher asked her to read aloud from the textbook. Since the book was now too smudged to read, she quietly stuffed it into her desk. Junko was furious and immediately ordered Saki to stand in the hallway as punishment. Saki felt deeply wronged. If she hadn't been falsely accused of theft, she wouldn't have been targeted by the entire class. Yet the bullying from her classmates hadn't stopped. That afternoon, as Saki packed her bag, she discovered it filled with trash. Saki couldn't believe it. She never imagined her classmates would stoop so low. Everyone stared with gleeful satisfaction, as if mocking Saki for getting what she deserved. Fortunately, Ms. Tomomi from another class happened to pass by. Tomomi instantly sensed something was wrong. She firmly demanded to know who had done such a terrible thing. Seeing everyone fall silent, Tomomi hurried to find their homeroom teacher. Upon meeting Junko, Tomomi immediately reported, "Saki from your class is being bullied by her classmates." But Junko simply replied, "Don't bother. No one will admit to it." Tomomi couldn't understand. Junko should at least publicly condemn it. Perhaps that might rein the children in a bit. And if I step in to defend Saki in front of everyone, it'll only fuel the kids' rebellious streak. They might just bully her even worse. Though Tomomi disagreed with this approach, Junko's firm stance left her no choice but to back down. By the time school let out that evening, Saki was still deeply troubled. Being isolated by the entire class felt unbearable. She found herself missing her desk partner, Toshiro, intensely. But Toshiro, unable to endure the classmates' indifference, had already chosen to escape by taking a leave of absence. Now, Saki walked home alone. Unexpectedly, even away from school, her classmates still wouldn't leave her alone. Two boys shoved her to the ground, completely unaware how deeply this hurt Saki. Back home, Saki stared at her books covered in graffiti calling her a thief. She considered telling her mother, but ultimately chose to bear it alone. She knew that even parental intervention would only bring temporary relief. The next day, as Saki approached the classroom door, she saw her desk abandoned in the hallway. She opened the door, ready to carry it inside. Suddenly, A bucket of cold water was dumped over her head. Seeing their plan succeed, they began taunting her. Saki felt increasingly wronged. Her classmates had once been so united in caring. How could they have changed so much? She turned and ran straight out of the classroom, refusing to stay at school any longer. But before she could exit the school gates, Junko blocked her path. Junko demanded harshly, "Where are you rushing off to? But if you surrender to me and apologize for your earlier defiance, I'll step in to protect you," Junko told Saki. "If you're unhappy, then toughen up. Crying won't change anything." After saying this, Junko turned and walked away, leaving Saki standing silently in thought. Yet the young girl still couldn't figure out what she should do. Later, Saki wandered aimlessly down the street, her mind in turmoil. Only then did she realize she had nowhere to go except school, so she sought out Toshiro, who had withdrawn from school. Perhaps sensing Saki's low spirits, Toshiro said little. He told her to lie down, gaze at the sky, and empty her mind, that doing so would wash away many worries. When Toshiro learned of Saki's ordeal, he immediately encouraged her, "Don't be afraid. Tomorrow, I'll walk to school with you." And so, the next morning, the two began walking to school together. Toshiro's presence brought Saki an unexpected sense of relief, but as they approached the classroom, they saw Saki's desk and chair still in the hallway. Surprisingly, not only did the two move back into the classroom, but they also enthusiastically greeted everyone. The classmates exchanged bewildered glances. They had thought Saki had been completely defeated. Before they could react, the class bell rang, and Junko entered the classroom. Strangely, after the entire class stood to greet her, the two never sat down. Ignoring Saki, Junko announced something more important. There would be no summer vacation this year. Every day would be spent in school for remedial classes. She had prepared many red dots, and students who performed well could earn one. Later, based on the number of red dots, a competition would be held. The student with the fewest dots would have to accept a punishment. The top 10 students by red dot count would also receive rewards. Not only would they receive their elementary school graduation certificates early, but they would also be exempt from homework next semester. Saki nervously told the teacher that the hot summer was meant to be children's vacation time, while studying was very important. The teachers shouldn't take away their summer break. Unexpectedly, as soon as the teacher finished speaking, the students began standing up one after another. In order to receive their graduation certificates early, they all chose to agree to forego summer vacation. Soon, Junko's actions sparked parental backlash. Parents were alarmed that their sixth graders had never faced such an unusual demand. They feared summer classes would overwhelm the children. Junko patiently addressed all concerns. Some children spend their breaks glued to TV. Others attend expensive cram schools. Parents even manage their daily routines. Wouldn't it be better to send them all to school instead? Wouldn't it be better for me to manage them all centrally? To persuade the parents, Junko also presented an irresistible reason. Summer school would be completely free. Parents wouldn't have to pay a single penny. And so, under Junko's plan, the summer program officially began the next day. Junko had the students do exercises early on, believing that balancing work and rest was also part of education. After the exercises, the students lined up to receive little red dots. Faced with such an engaging reward system, everyone was bursting with motivation. Next came classroom assignments. To secure a spot among the top 10 red dot recipients, every student wrote with utmost diligence. Chie, usually the top performer, finished first as expected. Competition among classmates grew increasingly fierce. Even during home economics class, they raced to see who could work fastest. They scrambled to present dishes to Junko before the food was even cooked through. After a week, some students had amassed a commanding lead in red dots. As the punishment for having the fewest dots, Saki and Toshiro were left behind to clean the classroom. The rest of the group wasn't spared either. They had to scrub the entire classroom spotless. So after everyone left, the four of them reluctantly started cleaning. But Saki still felt it was a waste of summer vacation. She suggested to Chie, "Why don't we skip class tomorrow? Let's go to the amusement park first, then get a sweet shaved ice." Though Chie refused. Late that night, Saki came up with a plan. She gathered stacks of stationery and carefully composed heartfelt messages. Saki wrote a thick bundle of letters, working late into the night at her desk. The next morning, Saki rushed to school carrying letters for every classmate. As soon as she entered the classroom, she slipped each letter discreetly into their desks. Just then, Aimi arrived in the classroom. Since the punishment included cleaning the next day, Aimee hurriedly urged everyone to get to work, but Chia not only pretended not to hear but also started reading a book on her own. Unexpectedly, upon seeing this, Aimee, acting as the group leader, ordered Chia to start cleaning immediately. Perhaps because Chia had seen through her true feelings, Aimee suddenly felt ashamed and ran out of the classroom. Even Saki thought Chia's words were too harsh. They might hurt the timid and sensitive Aimee. Faced with Saki's reminder, Chia stormed out of the classroom in anger. She went alone to the rooftop to ponder. What Saki didn't know was that Chia deeply disliked Aimee. Because Aimee had betrayed Saki before, she casually flipped through Saki's letter, which read, "I want to be your best friend." Just then, Saki found her on the rooftop. Rushing over, she declared, "We'll always be best friends." Saki hurried back to the classroom, eager to share more with her classmates, but before she could enter, she heard the students mocking her letter. Worse still, they were tearing up the envelopes, preparing to throw them away as trash. Unable to bear the sight, Toshiro stepped in to stop them. Saki feared escalating the situation and urgently urged Toshiro to stop. Unexpectedly, during the shoving, a male student accidentally struck Saki, knocking her onto the corridor floor. Everyone panicked instantly, horrified by the scene unfolding before them. Only when Junko saw the crowd gathered did she realize something was terribly wrong. Without hesitation, Junko scooped Saki up and rushed her to the infirmary. Fortunately, it was only a superficial cut from broken glass. Junko's quick treatment soon stopped the bleeding. Meanwhile, the classmates who had witnessed Saki's injury froze in place. Toshiro shouted angrily, "You're all weak cowards." They had spent 6 years together, once united and caring. Why, after the new teacher arrived this year, did everyone seem like completely different people? Then Toshiro began picking up the envelope fragments scattered on the floor by himself. Chia said nothing but stepped forward to help. Perhaps understanding Toshiro's words, Aimee instinctively opened her own letter. It read, "Next week is your birthday. I'll give you a surprise gift then." Aimee's eyes welled up. Though she had hurt Saki before, Saki showed no sign of holding a grudge. Just then, Saki, her wound bandaged, returned to the classroom. Seeing her limping painfully, the students all felt guilty and avoided looking at her. Only Junko's appearance made them quickly return to their seats. Unexpectedly, as soon as Junko entered the classroom, she assigned the injured Saki to clean the hallway. With no other choice, Saki slowly shuffled toward the hallway under everyone's gaze. But just as she bent down to pick up the shards, Chia bravely stood up. The moment Chia finished speaking, Aimee unexpectedly stood up too, declaring she would help Saki as well. Not only that, but as the two openly defied Junko, the other students gradually rose to join them. Compared to endless competition for grades, friendship among classmates was just as important. Watching the children grow, a trace of unexpected relief flickered in Junko's eyes. Nevertheless, she announced a more important matter. Once the students finished cleaning, they would line up to speak with her individually. The first would be Akari. Afterward, Junko looked at Akari sternly. "The class is too chaotic right now. I want you to be the teacher's eyes and ears." Junko also gave a reason Akari couldn't refuse. Saki entered the classroom that day only to discover her desk was missing. Instead of rushing to find it, she sat on the floor in front of the teacher alongside others without desks. Though she understood this was the teacher's punishment, Saki couldn't help but ask where her desk was. The teacher deliberately pretended not to hear and told the others not to be affected. With no other choice, the four sat on the floor through the entire lesson. It wasn't until noon that they finally retrieved their desks from the storage room. But just as they were carrying them upstairs, they happened to encounter the principal passing by. Finding it odd that they were moving desks, the principal inquired and learned this was Ms. Junko's punishment. The principal found it hard to believe, so he decided to secretly observe Ms. Junko during class to see if she was truly as the children described. This scene was also overheard by Akari, who was hiding behind the door. That very afternoon, the principal arrived at the classroom door. Unexpectedly, Junko seemed fully prepared. She shed her usual stern demeanor, leaving the principal no choice but to give up. He dismissed it as the children playing a prank. Later, back in her office, Junko began praising Akari for her excellent work. "Keep up the good work," she said. "You're becoming the teacher's most trusted informant." Not only that, but Akari's reports soon grew more frequent. Whenever she had a moment, she would go alone to see Junko. Yet, despite Akari's overtures, Junko inexplicably made sure Saki saw them. She even deliberately led Saki to the room next to the classroom. Curiosity got the better of Saki, who crouched by the door to eavesdrop on their conversation, since it was the only path to the classroom. Two classmates soon noticed Saki. They crouched down to listen too. As time passed, more and more students discovered the spot. One by one, they pressed their ears against the door, all curious about the secrets inside. Akari wouldn't stop until she'd gossiped about every single person. But strangely, Junko seemed aware of the eavesdroppers outside. She deliberately began fishing for information. First, she brought up Akari's previous theft of a wallet. Then she handed it directly to Akari as a reward. Seeing the wallet in her grasp, Akari quickly stuffed it into her clothes. Finally, Junko gave the students ample time to leave with a glance toward the doorway. The moment Akari returned to class, everyone shot her reproachful glances. Just as Akari grew tense, the wallet dropped to the floor. With the evidence now undeniable, no amount of explanation could clear her name. She could only lower her head and stand silently, facing her classmates' accusations. Only when the music class bell rang did the students gradually leave the classroom. Akari remained behind, utterly bewildered. Later, Saki felt a pang of sympathy for Akari. After all, they had once been best friends. Saki believed Akari wasn't inherently bad. She must have been tricked by Junko into doing this. She recalled an incident last year when she accidentally broke Akari's birthday gift. She'd expected Akari to ignore her forever. But the next day, Akari had actually come to school with her. When I apologized, Akari simply said she'd forgive me if I treated her to ice cream. Thinking of this, Saki went straight to Akari's house after school. She intended to offer comfort, but found Akari wasn't home. She gathered friends to search separately. 3 hours after school ended, Saki grew deeply worried for Akari. The resourceful Chie even planned to contact every classmate for help. Finally, late into the night, Saki found Akari at the school. She had trashed the classroom beyond recognition. Just then, Junko and the other students arrived. Seeing the scene, Akari screamed, "It's all this classroom's fault. If this classroom didn't exist, I wouldn't have ended up like this." Junko said, "Since you're already 12, you should have the sense to refuse unreasonable demands. You kids always blame your parents and teachers whenever something upsets you." Junko then turned to the entire class. "And you all, the moment a classmate makes even the smallest mistake, you start treating her coldly. After spending 6 years together, shouldn't you stand united for the sake of friendship? As your teacher, I admit I've been strict with class management, but do you understand my true intention? It's to make you strong and independent, because the essence of education isn't just learning. Growing self-reliantly is equally important." After saying this, Junko turned and left, leaving Akari alone to reflect on her destruction of the classroom. The next day, perhaps lacking the courage to face her classmates, Akari slept through the morning. Unexpectedly, a familiar voice suddenly sounded outside her window. Pulling back the curtains, she saw Saki inviting her to school. Saki wore a smile, as if nothing had ever happened. Soon, the two were walking to school together. Saki kept telling jokes, but Akari couldn't muster any interest. Her mind was consumed by one question: would Saki forgive her? Before long, classmates surrounded Akari on the way. Perhaps understanding Junko's words from the night before, they didn't isolate the errant Akari. Instead, they greeted her warmly. It felt just like the beginning of first grade. That unity and warmth when everyone first met. Then the whole class walked into school together, chatting and laughing, full of enthusiasm. This scene was all observed by Junko, watching from the shadows. That day, the students were surprised to find their teacher seemed unusually different during class. Not only was she dressed elegantly and gracefully, but she also wore a gentle smile constantly. The students were so puzzled they couldn't speak. How could the teacher, who was always stern, undergo such a drastic change today? Saki couldn't help but feel overjoyed, for this was the ideal teacher she had always envisioned. However, Saki was soon jolted back to reality by her desk mate. It had all been a beautiful dream. As the class bell rang, the teacher who entered the classroom was still the intimidating Junko of every day. And today, she bluntly informed all the students that the junior high entrance exams were just 2 months away. "If you don't study diligently now, you'll end up in a mediocre public middle school with no future." No sooner had Junko finished speaking than Chie, the top student in the class, stood up. She looked at Junko earnestly. "Doesn't that mean private schools are necessarily better than public ones? I believe that as long as it's a place where you can study, students can get into university from any school." To test Chie's words, Junko immediately asked those who agreed to raise their hands. The students rose one after another in response. Soon, Half the class had raised their hands. However, Junko noticed that only the underperforming students had stood up. Not a single high achiever had raised their hand. Junko remarked, "It seems only the poor students complain." She then ordered all who raised their hands to clean the classroom. This way, she added, the rest can focus more on studying. This blatant discrimination immediately fueled resentment among the students who had raised their hands. After class, they gathered in the storage room to plot their response. They quickly agreed to protest Junko by boycotting class. When the next period began, the students planning the protest all stood up. Chie, acting as their representative, declared, "Unless you rescind the order forcing the lower performing students to clean, we will not attend class." Junko even suggested canceling the traditional elementary school graduation ceremony to give the top students ample time to prepare for exams. That so-called class reunion is utterly meaningless, nothing but a waste of time. Though Chie failed to persuade Junko, they stood firm in their choice to defy her extreme management through a walkout. But as the lower performing students began leaving the classroom, one boy among the top students couldn't help but ask Junko, "Is our class graduation ceremony really cancelled?" Junko understood they secretly longed for the ceremony too. Yet to keep the remaining students focused, she began sowing discord between the two groups. She told the stayers, "The underachievers call you nerds and geeks every day." To achieve her goal, Junko headed straight to the junk room where the underachievers hung out after class. "I can see your future clearly," she declared. Then, turning slowly, she added, "Want to hear how the top students describe you? They say you're not only lazy but stupid. And your stupidity is contagious." Though the honors students' words were infuriating, they still yearned for the graduation ceremony. Watching other classes prepare for theirs, they couldn't help but feel envious. Sure enough, by the next day, Junko's scheming had worked. The moment they arrived at school, the two groups began glaring at each other. They hurled back every single insult they'd heard from Junko, word for word. The argument quickly escalated into a full-blown brawl right there in the schoolyard. Junko watched the entire scene unfold. Even back in their classrooms, the tension between the two groups remained palpable. Fortunately, Saki arrived just in time. Sensing the uneasy atmosphere, she hurried to a higher vantage point. With her innocence, she managed to calm the classmates who were on the verge of conflict. Saki beamed at everyone. "Last night, Aimi and I stayed up designing the graduation commemorative artwork. Unexpectedly, the students took one look and unanimously decided they absolutely had to complete this graduation project. The design was simply irresistible." Just then, the class bell rang. When Junko entered the classroom, the entire class stood up. In unison, they declared they wanted to make the graduation commemorative project. The students who had skipped class returned to attend lessons. Come lunchtime, Saki mysteriously brought in materials for the graduation project. Each student received a brand new tile. From then on, whenever they had free time, they would take out their tiles and sketch their own commemorative designs according to the blueprint. A week later, they finally completed their profoundly meaningful work. First, they laid white cloth across the gymnasium floor. Then they began assembling the patterns they envisioned. As the final tile fell into place, the students finally saw the elementary school memento they'd longed for. The character for friendship was imprinted with every student's smiling face. Though 6 years together wasn't long, nor was it short, this friendship had already etched itself deeply into their hearts. Yet what they didn't know at that moment was that beyond feeling comforted for her students, Junko had another major task awaiting her. During lunch, when a student was being picky, she stood right in the classroom watching, just to correct the habit of wasting food. But this proved too difficult for Saki, having disliked green peas since childhood. She lingered over her lunch today. Junko didn't spare even students who weren't being picky. When a boy was reading manga during lunch break, she confiscated it on the spot. Unable to bear it any longer, one boy chose to confront Junko directly. He argued that during lunch break, Junko shouldn't treat students so harshly. Instead of listening, Junko confiscated the boy's toy as well. Saki, his deskmate, knew that toy was the only memento left by his mother. Immediately after class, Saki rushed to Junko to plead for the toy's return. Yet Saki remained puzzled, suspecting Junko might have ulterior motives. Could this strict discipline be meant to help us break bad habits? But the rest of the class hadn't considered this. They were still brainstorming ways to defy Junko. Finally, pooling everyone's ideas, they came up with a plan. If Junko wants to scare us with her harshness, we'll deliberately frustrate her. First, never be late for class. Second, never waste lunch, and we absolutely couldn't bring unnecessary items to school. As long as we gave Junko no grounds to criticize us, we'd never face her scolding again. Of course, the most crucial point was to always wear a smile, no matter what happened. So the next day, before Junko even entered the classroom, all the students sat down obediently. When lunchtime came, the students stopped being picky eaters. Everyone finished their meals cleanly right in front of Junko. Even when classmates couldn't answer questions in class, no one laughed at them. Instead, to show class unity, everyone uniformly flashed smiles. Unexpectedly, that evening a stranger arrived at Saki's house. It turned out the Board of Education had heard rumors of Junko abusing students and came to investigate. Since Saki was the student punished most by Junko, the board asked her 2 questions. Saki gradually realized the board seemed solely focused on Junko's negative aspects. She hurriedly explained that Junko's methods were meant to help them grow, but the board showed no interest in her words, already intent on gathering evidence against the teacher. Before Saki could finish speaking, the officials stood up to leave. The next day at school, Saki learned from classmates that the board had visited their homes too. Their purpose was the same, to investigate Junko. Yet Saki remained skeptical. Perhaps Junko was a good teacher after all, just with a somewhat strict teaching style. Gradually, her classmates began to realize it was true. Lately, no one was late to class, and everyone had stopped being picky eaters at lunch. Their grades kept improving with each test. Could this be Junko's goal? But mere speculation wasn't enough. Ultimately, they decided to test Junko. They heard the Education Bureau would observe class today, so they planned to seize the chance to ask their burning questions. Soon enough, the Education Bureau officials arrived in the classroom. Introduced by the vice principal, the lesson that would decide Junko's future officially began. Yet the young students remained oblivious to the stakes. Just as Junko prepared to start the lesson, a student stood up. They expected Junko to tone down her usual approach with the Education Bureau present, but to everyone's surprise, she remained as stern as ever. She told all the students, reading isn't something you have to do. It should be something you actively want to do, because in the future, you'll encounter many things you don't understand. Interesting things, troublesome things, and things that feel strange. So naturally, you need to learn more knowledge to approach each mystery with curiosity. Then another student stood up. Why do you put so much pressure on us and punish our classmates so harshly? When you face hardships in the future, you must have the perseverance and courage to resist. Only then can you live better than others. At this moment, Saki couldn't help but look at Junko. Please tell us the truth. You're actually a good teacher, right? I heard a story once. Even mighty lions let their cubs hunt alone. You must be the same. Are you deliberately putting on this fierce act to make us grow strong? Junko glanced at the education official, meeting a meaningful gaze. The official seemed satisfied with the answer. She strode sternly out of the classroom and immediately summoned the principal to her office. She ordered the principal to dismiss Junko. Teaching profound lessons to elementary students was a waste of class time. Moreover, Junko's answers were too harsh. She feared the students would become anxious about their futures. Finally, at dusk, the grade director happened to pass by the hallway and discovered that while all students had been dismissed, Junko remained in the classroom, lost in thought. Unexpectedly, the next moment, Junko collapsed onto the floor. When the students learned their teacher had taken sick leave, they all came to the office at noon to inquire. Deeply concerned about her health, they desperately wanted to visit her at the hospital. Led by other teachers, the students soon arrived at the hospital. But strangely, the hospital room she'd checked into just yesterday was completely empty. There was no sign of the teacher on the bed at all. Realizing Junko might have been discharged, the group then tracked down her home address. Not only was Junko nowhere to be found, but the room was completely bare, no furniture in sight. Clearly, Junko had deliberately moved out overnight to avoid being found by her students. Afterward, the students were deeply puzzled. Where could Junko have gone? She was sick. Why would she deliberately hide from us? But Toshiro quickly came up with a plan. Remember how Junko always appeared the moment we got into trouble? If we provoked the delinquents, I'm sure Junko would come to protect us. So right after school, Toshiro took 2 other boys to confront the troublemakers. But his plan was too simplistic. Within a few moves, all 3 were knocked to the ground. Just as the delinquents were about to attack others, a familiar figure suddenly appeared. But the delinquents didn't even flinch. Instead, they charged forward with even more aggression. Junko, however, was ready. With a few swift moves, she took down 2 of them. Yet, perhaps still weakened by illness, she was unexpectedly kicked to the ground. The delinquents pinned her down, holding her down fiercely. In desperation, Junko quickly pulled out her pen and fought back. Only then did the gang of delinquents finally get scared and run away. Students immediately rushed to check on Junko's injuries, yet Junko only said, "You mustn't do such dangerous things. Protecting yourselves is the most important thing." After reporting the incident to the police, Junko collapsed weakly onto the ground, waiting to give her statement. The next day, as soon as Junko arrived at school, the vice principal began sternly reprimanding her. "The Board of Education has been informed about last night's incident. They've decided to dismiss you." But Junko paid no heed to the vice principal. She understood perfectly well the negative impact this would have. Nevertheless, Junko walked straight into the classroom to teach, as if realizing their grave mistake. The students stood up one by one to apologize to Junko. "If we hadn't thought of this absurd plan, you wouldn't have gotten hurt." Hearing their remorse, Junko said little. She ordered everyone to stand for the entire class period and write a profound self-criticism. Outside the door, the vice principal, observing this, could no longer tolerate it and decisively stepped in to stop her. "You are no longer a teacher here. Leave the classroom immediately." But Junko insisted on finishing the lesson. The vice principal stormed out in anger. Only then did the students realize Junko had been dismissed from the school, though they had once hoped for this outcome. Facing it now, they felt an inexplicable sense of loss. Over the past year, through their interactions, they had gradually understood Junko's sincere intentions. As the classroom atmosphere grew somber, Junko solemnly addressed everyone. "You will encounter many beautiful things in your future. You will see countless stars in the night sky, and you are butterflies striving to fly. You must unleash your unique talents and abilities. Then strive wholeheartedly to enter your ideal junior high school for yourselves and for your future." Perhaps moved by Junko's resolve, the teachers summoned by the vice principal ceased his obstruction. Junko continued, "Don't dwell on sadness now. You'll experience life's true richness when you reach high school and beyond, all the way to university." With that, she gazed deeply at every student before leaving the classroom with a lonely air. In the days that followed, the vice principal took over the class. To his astonishment, Junko's former students not only attended lessons with utmost dedication, but when he posed questions, every single one raised their hands eagerly. It was the most outstanding class the vice principal had ever seen. Time passed swiftly, and before they knew it, graduation day arrived. At the ceremony, the students dressed formally to receive their diplomas, yet they still longed to see Junko appear, because only a diploma handed out by Junko held true meaning. Unexpectedly, Junko stood right outside the ceremony hall. She simply stood in the hallway, sharing in the students' growth, choosing not to enter the graduation venue. The vice principal witnessed this entire scene. Junko then visited her former classroom. She stood at the lectern for a very long time. Each familiar desk held a student she had taught with all her heart. Just as she turned to leave, the classroom lights suddenly flickered on. Soon, all the students gathered before Junko. They said they had something to show her. A display board was pushed into the classroom. Unveiling the black cloth revealed the students' graduation commemorative display. Yet something was different. Junko's image had been added to it. She couldn't help but feel deeply touched. For a teacher, this was the greatest encouragement, a testament to her students' recognition. Next, the students began sharing words of gratitude. Every sentence overflowed with heartfelt appreciation. Tears welled up in everyone's eyes. In truth, Junko was more than just a teacher to them, she was a guiding light for their futures. As Junko turned to leave, the students surprised her by singing a farewell song. Deeply moved, Junko fought back her emotions, lifting her head to hold back tears. Though the song was filled with choked voices and off-key notes, it was the purest expression of their feelings. The story concludes with Saki's first day of junior high. She ran energetically to school as usual. By coincidence or design, Saki encountered Junko halfway. She rushed to greet her, but Junko only said, "Keep up the good work," urging Saki to hurry lest she be late. The final frame of the drama freezes on Junko's look of deep satisfaction.